I come from a family that they believe they are descendants of the old gods. That's the best way to say it. That they believe that they are carriers of a seed line that gives them the divine right to rule. And that is what gives them justification spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, scientifically to dominate the lesser species known as humans. Humans literally means a lesser species of man. And they do not believe they are a human in the same way. They believe they are something other than. And that's descendants of this hierarchical ruling species that is from the celestial realm that descended in the days of Jared and came down. And there's a lot of half-breeds. And there's a lot of quarter breeds, right? There's a lot of people that don't know this stuff and they start to get into lesser magic. And all of a sudden, it's like the doors of everybody open to them. But that's why. It's because they can host these things better. Whereas those that don't, they get taken over by this stuff and they can't change back. They can't return in a sense. Like people become completely possessed and are incapable of expelling the darkness after that. And who do you turn to?
What's going on, guys? We are back with another episode, man. In today's video, we have a crazy conversation between the host of the Confessionals podcast and this gentleman, Nathan Reynolds, who claims to be from the bloodline of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, kind of the, some of those main bloodlines people like to float around in conspiracy circles, all that crazy good jazz. Either way, it's a very good conversation and I want you guys to take a look at it with me. So thanks for watching and let's hop into today's video.
The show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
really,
man.
Absolutely.
So you come from a family that I've seen described online. I don't know if you describe it this way, but you come from a family that people have described it as a Illuminati family. Is that how you would describe it?
That's not how I would describe it in the same way. I'll be honest. It's I think it's just a popular catchphrase that a lot of people are borrowing into. No, I come from a family that they believe they are descendants of the old gods. That's the best way to say it. That they believe that they are carriers of a seed line that gives them the divine right to rule. And that is what gives them justification spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, scientifically to dominate the lesser species known as humans. Humans literally means a lesser species of man. And they do not believe they are a human in the same way. They believe they are something other than. And that's descendants of this hierarchical ruling species that is from the celestial realm that descended in the days of Jared and came down and procreated with the daughters of men, and that they still trace their seed line back to Gilgamesh till Nimrod. And so this is what the dynastic families believe they have, is a superiority in their genetics on one side and the ability to commune with the divine. And so their children are progenitors of these, some might call them abreactions, mutations, these skills, psychic abilities, that kind of stuff, all variants of it. And so they raise up their children in this path with which involves a tremendous amount of shattering of the soul and the identity so that there's compartmentalization within. And it allows them the ability to train their child up in a way that makes them conducive towards the family. I call them the family. That's what I called them. It's a better word for mafia than any.
Yes, that's wild. So he just came out the closet there essentially and said that his family, and I'm pretty sure the people, his family in the circles that they run with, they claim to be from the bloodline of the fallen gods, aka the fallen angels that fell with Lucifer, came down, procreated with the women of earth, and ultimately had babies that were Nephilim, that were offspring of man and of fallen angels. And now that bloodline is still alive, and somehow this gentleman is connected to it, that's just fascinating. And it's crazy to think that there is still people walking around with fallen angel DNA in them, and they have the knowledge of it, and they're worshiping it and shattering their kids in the ways that he's probably been shattered. It's just insane.
Anything else, but no, we didn't call ourselves, like my family wouldn't ever call themselves Illuminists. Right? They're Luciferian. That's for certain. They worship Hallel and Shahar, as he's really known, but different reasons than what people are ascribed to,
Interesting. All right. So I want you to start from the beginning of what your childhood was like and just walk us through this. But before you do, you just said something that I got to ask you before I forget. What they believe, do you believe is true in the sense of them being able to trace back their lineage to the fallen?
Some of them, yes. I believe they absolutely can.
Do you think that's in your blood?
I believe it was, yeah. I believe it is.
Yeah.
I believe there's no way to physiologically necessarily. My blood's been augmented a lot over the years. I volunteered for a lot of stuff and said yes to everything that they could ever give me that would make me better than what I was. I was on a desperate quest for relief. And so I volunteered for all kinds of stuff. And I volunteered for stuff that was transhuman in its nature.
Really?
And it augmented me quickly, you know? And
That's wild. That's wild. Yeah. I wonder I wonder who this they that he's talking about is, and what they put in him to augment him. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. In our previous video with Pastor Charles Murphy, where we was reacting to one of his sermons, we were talking about transhumanism and how, with the creation of AI and the advancement of AI, they're pushing this stuff with people wanting to be, an advanced and capable and at sometimes even robotic human being as possible, because of the capabilities that AI possesses and what it can do to processing for a human, and even, for a human's health. It's just crazy, man. It's crazy. So the fact that, he's living it out. He's a walking testament to transhumanism because of the fallen angels and the Nephilim. That's just, dude, that's insane.
that was brutal. Because then there's this, I lived a lot longer than I expected. Let me just put it that way. I did not think I would ever see 18. Never even comprehended the idea that I would ever know a family that wasn't this other thing, where the powers of control and access were given through the abuse of children. That's what I knew as normal. And I knew that people were corrupt and monsters and were willing to devour each other to rise to the top. I understood what wolves were when they ran the world. And so it was very hard for me to get to a place where I could believe that I could be redeemed, because I had witnessed enough of things in the families that make it seem like I am irredeemable forever. And it took me, there was one book that made a massive difference in that, which was called The Gospel to Every Creature. And I believe it's written by John Darnell. It is very hard to find. I have a copy, but it's been scrubbed. And it's the good news to Nephilim, vampires, and transhumans, and it helped me to see that maybe I wasn't anathema, that maybe just because I have the seed line in me, that maybe just because I'm a progenitor of the offspring of the fallen, that it doesn't mean that I'm not able to be redeemed. Because no matter what, by blood or by belief, I believe that we have a Messiah that overcame and we can overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony, and not living our lives when faced with death.
Wow.
And it was that powerful encounter with the Almighty, with the true judge of all the earth, who I can make an appeal to, who can give me a new bloodline, and that's what he offers to everyone. Wow. And so I do believe that's available to those that come from these families.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. This gentleman's a Christian. I should have threw that in the intro, but that is amazing. Think about that. Hell was invented for Satan and his fallen angels. Therefore, this gentleman, being a part of that bloodline that has that blood in him, he essentially believed he was irredeemable. He essentially believed, man, there's no way for me to be saved because I am unfortunately a part of that fallen lineage. But somehow he got a hold of that book he was mentioning, and it was like he said, it was the gospel for the unwanted in his mind, and it pulled him out of it. And that is beautiful. Look at God to save you even in the lowest places, man. You can be Nephilim and he'll still save you, I'm assuming, because this gentleman is Nephilim.
It's wild. I didn't. Last year in the Christmas season, I took the last 2 weeks of the year off, and I had other people host the show. And my friend Joel did an episode that he called "Good Nephilim," and he kind of goes into this idea of Nephilim being able to be redeemed.
Yeah,
and it's a concept that I feel like has not been tapped into a whole lot. And he did on my show for I think the first time. And since then he's kind of uncovered more information to back up his claims. but having, a real life Nephilim here, not just kidding. But it's just, it kind of goes into that concept,
Yeah.
and so that's why I asked you, because I was like, hold on, like that's pretty wild. Like, to be like, have I ever encountered somebody who comes from that bloodline? Maybe. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, but how many times do you come across somebody that does come from that bloodline and acknowledges it, knows it? That's another thing. And so that's why I wanted to ask you that. So you kind of hit on the childhood stuff right there in that kind of description. Was it something that came from complete childhood, where it's like from your earliest memories is just been kind of manipulated and jacked up, and what was that like for you growing up?
Well, my family set up a base of operations. They're from the East Coast. The Reynolds family on one side. My mother's family, just for clarity, I've never exposed a lot of the side of things that were going on with. Let me say it another way. The Reynolds family on my father's side, they're all from the East Coast out here, and they're a dynastic family. Like my great grandfather, a man named Don Potter Reynolds, was the architect, the head of engineering for the president, as the president of the American Society of Civil Engineering back in the 80s. And he's the one who put the new torch in the Luciferian hand of the Statue of Liberty of Columbia. And so he's a master Mason Luciferian in that way. And he was so much of the shot caller for the family at that time, especially when I came into being. And but my dad left that thing and moved out to the Southwest and started a different empire. And so a lot of how it works in the families is you got two main approaches. If you've got unlimited access to wealth, power, like really, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about power, like unlimited raw power, where a phone call, the phone book, is far more powerful than the bank account, because it's who can open doors to power anywhere else in the entire world. And that's where everything was. Right. So you can leave with nothing. Right. But then you can go build. And if you need the phone book, there's a price to be paid. And the price to be paid is generally one of your children. This is like the reality accident.
What?
It seems bizarre to some, but a child is generally a chosen child out of the family, is given over as an offering to the family. And they're the ones who's going to go through this left-hand path. Okay. They're going to experience the desecration of their soul, their identity, and they're going to become an agent for the family that is owned completely. And there's like
yeah, I've heard about this before. I've heard about this with I don't know if you guys seen, but like with the Masonic rituals and stuff like that, where they're kind of like, they'll marry over one of their children to another member. Let me pull it up really fast right here. All right, so this is what I'm talking about right here, man. I seen this a while back, and it just creeped me out. And it actually was a ritual that they did in a Freemason lodge in Brazil, where, as you can see there, it kind of looks like what he's explaining in that video, man, which is just, it's mind-blowing. It's insane. If it's real, which it probably is, more than likely is, it's crazy. It's crazy. But let's back to the video.
Confines for how the wealth is distributed out there. And so in order to build your empire, you got to be able to go prove yourself. And that's what he ended up doing out in the Southwest. And he moved to Arizona, an area called Flagstaff, Arizona. And where I was born, that is a place that's a high place, Mount Humphreys. It's a volcanic peaks that sit there. And the top of it is where the Hopi Indian and a lot of people had gathered forever to commune with the fallen. They believed that the sons of the sky would come down every season at the winter solstice, and they would abide from the winter solstice to the summer solstice there. And so this was a place where they would give their daughters over to them. This is Hopi mythology, like 101, and they would make these Kachina dolls, which were an effigy of the what I would say is a watcher angel that would come, and the daughter would be given to him, and she would place that over her bed throughout her life, and that's her familiar spirit, right? That's where I was born into. And the people that still practice that old religion, that's the way I refer to it, they still do this. And they still take their children up there to give them over to them on these high days. And so I was born into that, and I was born through that seed line and into that ritual magic world. And but my mother's side are extreme Catholics and Jesuits through and through. And so her father ran a different operation in Southern California, which was much more based on the child exploitation side of the equation. And he operated out of Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Lake Havasu, for those of you that are unfamiliar, is an absolute desert border of Arizona and California, and it has the Colorado River that's been dammed up, and they created an artificial lake there. And it was a secret military base back in World War II. It was called Site 6, and it was a stopover point crossing the desert for soldiers going there. And they would made it into a rest and recuperation area, and so it was a party city. from its foundation. It had a lot of underground structures that were built into it as a refueling point. And in the 1960s, a guy named Robert P. McCulloch bought it. And he bought it, and he also purchased the London Bridge that crossed the River Thames. And he had it shipped over here stone by stone. And while they were doing that, they excavated 80 bodies that were entombed inside it in a practice that's called annulment, where you would sacrifice a person and bury them alive in the walls of the foundation. And so there's all these chambers in this facility of the London Bridge where they would do torture and all kinds of ritual stuff. But this is why the sing-song nursery rhyme, the London Bridge is falling down, falling down. That's a nursery rhyme to talk about how you have to give your children over to
No way.
the government so you can hold up the London Bridge. And they would literally take their children. This is in the history book of the museum at Lake Havasu City. You can see these.
What? Huh? What are we talking about here? I used to sing that song as a kid. London Bridge is falling down. Are you telling me? It is a song about rituals that the Masons came up with, and the elites, whoever they are, the Jesuits, I don't even know at this point. He's named so many groups. You got the Jesuits, the Catholics, the bloodlines, the Nephilim, the families. Man, it's crazy. It's crazy. How is this just gotten past us? I'm not letting my kids sing that song anymore. This is crazy.
Bodies of these children that were sacrificed inside the walls of that space. So he bought that as a charged object. He bought that as a portal mechanism. And they built in Lake Havasu City with another designer from the Disneyland. And they literally built a pleasure island. That's what it was facilitated for. And they designed it so that it would be a retirement community that would facilitate the exploitation of children. And that's exclusively what that city was founded and built for. And so the original founders of that operated out of Knights of Columbus predominantly as a wing of the Jesuits. And that's the business down there. It's an industry to cover up child. You got a bunch of old men running around with little boys, and everybody thinks they're grandchildren and nephews and nieces and all that rest. And so all along that area down there is where I would be taken from my earliest days and shattered, abused, traumatized, systemically so. But it's for behavioral modification purposes. That's the end goal of the abuse, is to shatter your willingness to.
I was just about to ask why, and that makes sense because it's all ritualistic. They're trying to break these children so they can be made in their image, essentially, and do what thou wilt, which is freaking crazy. This is insane, dude. So sad. So sad.
Resist and to break your will. And once they own you and you have been woefully convinced you can never get out, you give in. And that's what happened. I became the person who I was died, and the person they wanted me to become was what was born out of that disgusting Phoenix ashes.
What?
How long did
talk about born again in the spirit, but in the opposite way? Like that's being born again in the Antichrist. Like that is crazy. That's what they're doing. It's just the whole Antichrist system. They're trying to flip what Christ means and what it means to be a Christian and what it means to follow God the right way and what it means to live a righteous life, what it means to be, to understand that you're a sinner and that you need to be washed by the blood of Christ. And instead they want you to wash in the blood of whatever the rituals they're doing and telling their, children that they need to go stay with some old man down in Disneyland resorts. This is crazy. They're doing it to break them so they can be born in the spirit of evil. And man, I feel like that's why we have so many people, so many progenitors of evil in this world, because of systems like this that are designed to create people to do those things. Man, it's just no way.
Does that process take? I mean, was this like just a few years of your childhood, or was this like a constant thing throughout your teen years, or what?
I mean, every individual is different. How long does it take to break a dog? That was the approach they took with me. You find out everybody has different talents and giftings and capabilities and capacities. And so in the beginning phase, a lot of it is you're just raising them up a little more normally. There's a lot of early trauma stuff that's hard to articulate and can be messy with memory. But as I got older, like 5 and 6 years old, man, it became very apparent that I had a desire for justice. That was like the soul deepest desire that I had, was I wanted people to know freedom, because I had been so deprived of it from day one. And there's this practice of switching mothers. You'll have a cult mother, and then they have your regular mom, and then they create this trauma bonding so that you'll bond with anybody that they want you to do. And this happens by taking you away from your mom and your dad constantly and giving you new mom and dad, new uncles, new aunts, right? And so you're living in this constant state of destabilization. And so it's as that destabilization happens and that patterning is built up, that's when a lot of the programming comes in to stabilize these new personalities and these new pursuits and endeavors. But I had this zealousness to see injustice stopped and preyed on that. And so they gave me opportunities to fight back against these perverts who were abusing children. And they would build up in me this rage, this need for vengeance. And then they would let me release that on somebody. And in the beginning, it was people I knew were bad guys I'd seen abuse children. And I would slice their throats up, man. I would tear them to freaking ribbons.
What?
And I loved it because I finally felt like I could stop something that I knew was evil. And I thought this was the way to stop all these monsters in the world. I just wanted to hunt monsters in the night. I just wanted to go down in the tunnels and hunt.
They broke this, man. They broke this guy. Ryan, I'm sorry, dude. I meant not Ryan, excuse me. I'm thinking about Ryan Reynolds. I wonder if he's related to you too, by the way. But Nathan, dude, I'm sorry that you went through that, bro. I'm sorry that you went through that, dude. That is wild, man. Oh, man.
And that's what they kind of created in me, this just freak of a need to hunt. And then they would bury that away and you go back to normal life and you go back to Christian school and you go back to the regular life, and your parents act like it's just normal, but they're like, you got to have cover stories for why your child's all beat up and bruised and your face is smashed. And like, I've had multiple reconstructive plastic surgeries from fights, like fighting for my stinking life. You got to have cover stories. So we would move around constantly. My parents would move us around sometimes every 6 months or not. But once you have a friend or a teacher or somebody notices, starts asking questions, or you start bonding with somebody that's outside the cult, they're not going to tolerate that. And so we would move all the time. And now my sisters on the other side, they weren't roped into this thing. I was in a male cult. This is the Brotherhood of the Snake down in Lake Havasu. But this is, my sisters weren't caught up in the same thing, but they were caught up by the family as a whole. And so this carried on, and we moved into this place called Show Low Pinetop, Lakeside, Arizona. And this is where an area, they would move to these specific high places where the veil is really thin. There's a very famous story about a guy who had an alien encounter out there, Snowflake, Arizona. And this is an area where I was right on the Apache reservation. White Mountain Apache Reservation was 100 yards from my door. And they would go out into the Apache reservation to these specific high places and do these rituals and this ritual magic. And a lot of that involved. That was when it was the worst to me, because I was old enough to understand how vile what was happening, in ritual magic. And at the same time, I was the most readily influenced by the family side of the equation. I thought the family and the military was the way out, but I hated this occult side of it because I saw men become monsters physically in front of my eyes. Other things come out of people's mouths. Other things come through their eyes. Like I witnessed enough transfiguration to know that this stuff is 100% stalking in the darkness. And I don't want that to rule me forever, but it was hard to not resist. You're in it.
Well, so
wow. So there you go. He's even witnessed, I wouldn't even call it transfiguration, even though that's what it is. I would call it a physical manifestation of the demons that the people he was around probably were possessed by, and that they were doing these rituals and going to these high places where he said the veil was thin. So I'm assuming he's talking about where the line between the physical and the spiritual was very thin, to the point where it allowed for these things to occur. And he saw enough evil to where, like, he had the drive to do what he did, but also it probably terrified him enough to keep him within it. And that's scary. That's scary. Very scary.
All right, seeing things like that, like you say, all right, so you said you saw men become monsters. Is that metaphorically or literally?
It's literally. I've seen men do nasty things like an animal, but then I've seen men become not people.
Like literally
not be the people. Yeah.
Okay.
And there is like lycanthropy, and there's these understandings of what the watchers are capable of doing that most people are just woefully ignorant of. And that's why they're perishing. It's because they lack a basic understanding of history, And one of the predominant understandings of what a watcher, specific class of celestial beings, is capable of is augmenting itself. They can shapeshift. That is by their nature. They're literally called metaschizmadzotoi in the Greek in the New Testament. And it's because he says it's marvel not, because Hasatan you could say like transforms himself. That's a good word for it. But he shapeshifts himself into an angel of light. And his messengers, his apostles, disciples, they do the same thing. And he's like, this is because they are capable of becoming anything they want to be in order to deceive on one side of the equation. And that's what they'll do. And so when people start engaging in these necromantic rituals and other stuff, and they start to seek the embodiment of these celestial ones, they can get these things on them and in them, and they can't contain them. And some of these guys who are messing with this stuff, who don't come from the bloodline, are incapable of cohabitating like a parasite, and they feed off of each other and they can't handle it. And so that's why families are recruited from these bloodlines, and children are recruited out, even if they don't know anything about it. Like you said, the vast majority of people who come from these bloodlines, there's a lot of muddying of the waters. There's a lot of purity that's been changed. There's a lot of half-breeds. There's a lot of quarter breeds, right? There's a lot of people that don't know this stuff, and they start to get into lesser magic. And all of a sudden it's like the doors of everybody open to them. But that's why. It's because they can host these things better. Whereas those that don't, they get taken over by this stuff, and they can't change back. They can't return, in a sense. Like, people become completely possessed and are incapable of expelling the darkness after that. And who do you turn to? You're like, you're going to go to the Catholic guy who's all into the same thing that you're into, you know? Like, most people don't understand what a real deliverance is required for somebody that has gone down this far down, where they are consuming people.
Amen.
Like, that's a deep, devastating psychological, spiritual shock, physical, your liver, like the health. This is why I'm huge into health, because I've physically had to try to find ways to help people who have done all of these things. Like, the consumption of human blood does horrific things to the human body, you know? And this is a major practice within this. These families do drink blood. That's why we have these vampire class of people. It's not some kind of myth. People consume blood in order to extend their life force. Like, this is a normal thing. You got billionaires today who admit it on Joe Rogan podcasts and other places, where they're like, yeah, I used the blood of my son and all that. Like, you don't understand. This is a religion, you know, and this is a highly effective means of augmenting yourself. And so these watchers will give people this power. Their priest class will dispense that to people who want to go into, you know, like what I come from down there in the Apache reservation was the people that slip between realms and become animals, you know. And it's
you are hitting things that are confirming so many things.
That's crazy. That's crazy. They literally have a whole system set up to facilitate these practices and to make people, I'm assuming, higher up, you know, within the ranking systems of this spiritual occultism. And it looks like it runs deep. It looks like it runs deep. And this conversation is a very, very, very good one, guys. I highly recommend you go check out the full video in its entirety on the Confessionals channel. Link will be in the description, of course, guys. Really appreciate you sticking around today. Hope I didn't you know, rack your brain with too much of this craziness. If you are interested in it, like I said, go check it out in its entirety. Appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe for more content like this, guys. If you're interested in supporting the channel further from there, guys, I recommend buying some of our merch at JesusInJapan.store. We also got some really cool hats. This is Jesus Christ in Japanese, Aisu Krisuto, on a flame. I like to call it the Holy Spirit flame cross design. So check it out, guys, on the website. 20% off for my YouTube subscribers. Just use the code Holy Spirit at checkout, and yeah, you'll receive that discount. Appreciate you. Have a nice day.